Hello, and welcome to American Riviera Bank's Regional Pulse. This is Laurel Sykes, Chief Risk Officer for the bank. Today, we have Rob Fredericks with us to continue our series on how innovations in housing and adaptive reuse of existing buildings are helping to solve the need for housing here on the Central Coast. Rob has a long-tenured career in housing and has spent over 28 years with the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara, a housing authority that has received numerous... Then I had to slip up. Okay, here we go. Rob has a long-tenured career in housing and has spent over 28 years with the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara, a housing authority that has received numerous accolades for leading the charge in affordable housing in one of the most challenging markets in the nation. Rob has served as the Executive Director and CEO since 2016. He is a lifelong resident of the Central Coast of California. Raised on a horse ranch in the San Ynez Valley, Rob later earned a business management degree with an emphasis on real estate financial management from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, honing his skills in real estate transactions and project management upon graduation while working within the private sector managing entry-level housing developments on the Central Coast. During his time with the Housing Authority, he and his team have successfully created over 1,600 affordable housing units. Thanks for joining us, Rob.
Really happy to be here, Laurel.
Fantastic. I thought we'd start with a level setting for those of us who may not be as familiar with what the Housing Authority does. Can you tell our listeners more about how housing authorities support our communities?
Sure. Well, let me break it down to a 101 of what housing authorities are, how they came to be, and then kind of what they do. So this all started back in 1934. There was a National Housing Act that Congress put in place, that passed, and that law was going to allow the federal government to come in and build affordable housing throughout the nation in every state. That law was found to be a bridge too far, found to be unconstitutional in that it was superseding states' rights. So they went back to the drawing board, Congress, and established the 1937 Housing Act, which is the seminal housing act that we still live under to this day, with the goal of providing affordable housing to every person in this country that needs housing. We've fallen short of that goal, but with that goal, Congress said, what we will do is provide funding mechanisms and allocate that funding to the states, and the states can then build the affordable housing with that funding, with those programs. And so every state, they created state enabling legislation to create housing authorities to accept those funding sources, those programs, to create the public housing that was so necessary at the time, and is still necessary. And so housing authorities are creatures of state law. We are created under the Health and Safety Code of the state. So we're a local public agency created under the Health and Safety Code. And if anybody ever has a hard time going to sleep at night, just look up the Health and Safety Code, Housing Authority law, and it tells you exactly what housing authorities are enabled to do in their communities. And we have quite a bit of power as a public agency. We do have some police power in terms of we have the power of condemnation to acquire land. We can set our own lot lines. We can create our own lot lines, split lot lines to make housing work. And that's our charge, is to create affordable housing, and that's what we do. So most of the housing authorities were created right after that 1937 Housing Act. The states got to work right away, and like 1937 to 1944, there were a lot of housing authorities created. We are a much younger housing authority in the city of Santa Barbara. We weren't created until 1969, and which is kind of a good thing, because we were able to learn from the mistakes of those earlier housing authorities. And that's where when you hear of public housing, oftentimes people's minds go to those big high-rise complexes
Yeah.
back in Chicago
Yeah.
or the Pruitt-Igoe of St. Louis that they weren't very nice places. At the time they were built, they were okay, but they're just warehousing the poor, and they weren't really building community. And so we learned from those national missteps and did things differently here in Santa Barbara. So your audience can't see this, what I'm holding up, our 5-year action plan, but we do
They're
things a bit differently.
beautiful.
We do public housing Santa Barbara style.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're known for. We're known for taking great care in how we create the affordable housing that's so desperately needed, to where no matter who lives in these developments that we create, they can hold their heads up high and say, I live here.
Yeah.
This is my home. This is where I lay my head at night, and I'm proud of being here.
And not only that, but even driving past the housing projects that the Housing Authority has been involved with, they're beautiful buildings, Spanish style. I covet many of the gardens out in the front
Right.
of the properties or throughout the courtyards. They're just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. We get people pulling into our properties like Garden Court on Friday nights. They think it's a bed and breakfast, and they want to rent a room. Well, sorry, this is permanent housing, and they don't realize that it's affordable housing, and it's often the best. How can you tell what is affordable housing in this community? It's the best looking apartment complex on the block. That's how you can tell.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Garden Court especially, near and dear to my heart. It's a senior housing project. And I remember many moons ago doing elder financial abuse training for
Right.
some of your residents there. So
Yeah.
you and I have known each other a long time.
A long time, yes.
The other thing that I'm familiar with the Housing Authority here locally is your use of something called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. So sitting on the coordinating committee for that organization, each year I'm touched by the number of graduates I see coming through that program. And the idea is that it's voluntary and families can enter into the program. I think it's a 5 to 7 year action plan, right?
5-year action plan. It's a 5-year contract we enter in with families on our Housing Choice Voucher program. And it's to give the families tools to better their lives. And that's something we're proud of as well about the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, is that we're more than just the sticks and bricks that we provide, that we build. We're about helping families, helping break that generational poverty by giving families the tools they need to succeed in life. There are contracts on the Family Self-Sufficiency where the program coordinating committee, all these organizations help out, whether it's Santa Barbara City College, private businesses, banks, to help further the members' education, job training, a whole host of services to help the families with their goals. And we've had families be very successful opening their own businesses, buying their own homes. Even right here in Santa Barbara County, where buying your own home is kind of like, wow, how did they do
Absolutely.
that? But they've been able to save money and increase their incomes throughout the years being on the program, and it's just a great success, that
Absolutely.
program.
Absolutely. It's just fantastic. And the thing that I am most impressed about the program is the idea that as they continue to increase their earnings through their participation in the program, a portion of that will go into an escrow account for their use when they graduate to use towards starting a new business or owning a home.
Precisely. And those, as their income increases, as you said, that can be quite substantial over time. And we've had graduates receive their escrow check, because we escrow those funds into an escrow for them that they get to use for whatever they want at the end of that period when they graduate. And as you said, many of them have used those for starting a business, purchasing a home, they get
Even
to use it.
further education.
Further education, yeah. And they've 50,000 up to 100,000, even greater than that. These checks that I sign on these graduations, I'm shocked at how much money we've been able to set aside for them.
Absolutely.
And it's really through their own earnings increases over the years.
Yeah, their own earnings and their savings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing that's fantastic about the program is it has them move on into other types of housing, making those units available for others.
That's a key point you just made about that is us being able to recycle the very scarce affordable housing that's there's such a huge demand for. If these graduates no longer need that affordable housing, they can buy their home, they can rent their own home off the program, then we can reissue a voucher to another family on the wait list, or one of our own units that we own that we can then open up for use from another family that's so in need.
That's great. And when you say that there's such a need for it, how many people do you currently have on your wait list?
We have over 5,000 households on our wait
Wow.
list, and that is on the south coast of Santa Barbara County. Now, people can apply for our programs all from anywhere. If you live in New York or Florida or anywhere, you can apply online. We have our applications, you can apply, but we do have a preference for serving people who live or work here on the south coast of Santa Barbara County before we will ever serve those other applicants. And people don't realize that when they apply and they live in New York, well, I want to live in Santa Barbara, that's a nice place to live. Well, so do a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that is one area that is a distinction, and yet that 5,000 number, that's right here on the south. That's a number of applicants that are right here on the south coast of Santa Barbara County. And when people apply, they need help now. It's not easy going to a government agency and
Yeah.
asking
Yeah.
for help. And when people come to us and ask for help, it's not that they need help down the road. They need help now. And unfortunately, we don't have enough resources to help those 5,000 strong family members, households that need help. They have to wait 4 to 6 years before we can even get to them on the wait list as the wait list turns over. And that's the part that keeps me up at night, is how can we get more resources to serve those families quicker that
Absolutely.
need help now, not 4 to 6 years from now.
Now, you say 5,000 on your wait list. In looking through the city's housing element, it looks like they've also identified a need for, 8,001 families?
Yes, yeah, that's the regional housing needs allocation numbers, and that is what is set in our housing element in the city of Santa Barbara as a projected need over the next 8 years, that says this is what the need is that we need to provide for the community in terms of total number of housing units. And the majority of those 8,001 units are targeted for moderate to low income households, because that is where the true need is. Those are the most vulnerable. Those are the households that are most rent burdened, paying over 30% of your income for rent, for household costs, means you're rent burdened. And most of our households in the city of Santa Barbara, the renter populations, are paying over 50% of their income for rent. And those are the folks that really need help.
And these are the workforce of our local businesses.
Yes.
And the people that are in the restaurants or the hotels, teachers. It's our entire workforce.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what's, I was just looking at different occupations that qualify for low income, meaning those are the programs that we receive from the federal government, the Housing Choice Voucher program that can help with rental assistance. And so who is low income? A single household earning $91,000 a year is qualified and termed low income. That's a single person household. And so what jobs make up that low income category? Those are administrative support jobs like a maintenance technician for Marboard, front desk receptionist at the Children's Medical Clinic of Santa Barbara, administrative services coordinators at UCSB. We have servers at the Rosewood Miramar Hotel, room attendants, housekeepers at other hotels. We have educational services folks who work for the school district that are in that low income category. There are paraeducators, special education teachers, our first time teachers entering the workforce out of college. They're low income. And if we want them to stay in our community and help our kids, our households, we need to be able to provide them housing, or else we're not going to be able to retain these employees in these different organizations.
So speaking of teachers and the school districts, talk to our listeners a little bit about the work you've been doing with the local school districts.
Yeah, so recognizing the school district here, Santa Barbara Unified School District, recognizes that they have a huge issue with being able to attract and retain their employees, whether they're classified employees or whether they're credentialed teachers. Because of the high cost of housing, people are choosing, if they're here, they're choosing to leave because they can get better affordable housing, lower living costs elsewhere. And so we've partnered with the school district to create housing for their employees. And we worked over the last year to identify certain properties to look at for development. And the first one we're doing is the old Parma School right across on Montecito Street on the east side, right across the street, Montecito Street from Trader Joe's. That is an unused school district owned site that's sitting there laying fallow. And we all said, this is the one to do first. Since it's there, it's not being used. Let's redevelop that site. And that's a site that we can get about 30 units developed on specifically for school district employees. And we're able to do that because of a state law that passed called the 2016 Housing Act for Teachers. And that allows housing to be built on school district-owned property that specifically is for school district employees, where you couldn't before say, we're only going to rent these units to school district employees, because that would be a violation of fair housing. But with this law that passed that says if the school district owns the property in fee title and housing is built, then that housing can be utilized specifically targeted for school district employees and not violate fair housing. And we hopefully will be through our entitlement process by the spring of next year, and then gather the funding together and start construction of that development maybe fall of next year.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what we've been discussing during this housing series, this podcast series that we're doing, is innovation through the adaptive reuse of buildings that may no longer serve their original purpose. And that is a perfect example of a way to solve a problem. And as a mother who has also seen her own children going through the school system here, I appreciate what you're doing for our teachers.
Thank you. Yeah, my wife is a teacher, and third grade elementary school teacher at Hueneme Elementary down in Hueneme School District. And yeah, she tells me every day how many of her colleagues struggle day to day just to make things work for their families. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of innovations, tell us about how the old Sur La Table building turned into housing.
Yeah. So that's an interesting property. We all know that State Street in Santa Barbara, that's the main commercial hub, the main spine of our community really is State Street, downtown State Street. And it's been languishing for years, even before COVID.
Yeah.
With the new shopping online and everything else, the Amazon industry, it's changed things down on State Street. You walk down State Street now, and there's a lot of vacancy, vacant units just sitting there, and we need to revitalize that vital spine of Santa Barbara. And to do that, the city has made an effort of saying, okay, let's do some adaptive reuse and allow housing, permanent housing, right downtown, where really State Street can be their living room, their entertainment area. It's by shopping, it's by their businesses where people can work and whatnot. So, and the big thing was, okay, how do we make it work? Well, we need a starting point, and Jason Yardy of the Yardy family, that's a worldwide software company that started right here in Santa Barbara's backyard. Jason Yardy purchased Sur La Table, one of those vacant buildings that was languishing, with the idea of saying, let's do this as a test bed. Let's show other property owners that they too can do adaptive reuse, turn their properties into mixed use, have some commercial, have a number of the spaces upstairs or in the back be permanent residential rental units. And the way he did it with Cornell Architects is they devised a portion of it to remain commercial up front in that old Sur La building, and in the back, studio units, and upstairs studio units. So we have a total of 14 studio rental units.
That's great.
That was designed into it. Now, Mr. Yardy didn't necessarily want to hassle with doing the building of it and whatnot, and he came to us and said, if you guys do this and do this as a test bed, I'll donate this to the Housing Authority to do.
That's great.
And would you be willing to do that? And I said, well, yeah, the price is right. We'll do it. Because one of the main things is really the cost of the acquisition of the land.
Absolutely.
And the existing building that's there. And even doing that adaptive reuse, it's quite expensive, but that initial cost was taken off our plate. And we were able to build out the units. And when we completed construction, we advertised the units for rent. And the first 3 days of advertising the 14 units, we received over 100 applicants.
Oh, wow.
The demand is so high. And we immediately were able to rent out every single unit. The commercial took a little bit longer to find a commercial tenant. We finally were able to do that, and Alo Yoga, their yoga apparel company, like Lululemon or whatever that other apparel company is, they're like that, but they're doing their tenant improvements now in the commercial portion that fronts State Street. So
That's
soon
exciting.
They'll be up and running. We have the 14 residents living there now. They're adding to the vitality that State Street needs. People can do their shopping there. They can go to restaurants there. It's all right there, and that's what we need more of, and that's what we can point to show other property owners that have their property bought and paid for years to say, look, this works. We were able to make it work because they don't have the cost of the purchasing. They own the land, they own the buildings, they have the cost of doing the adaptive reuse, and we've shown you can make that work.
Well, I have to say, I did go on a tour when you opened it up to the public. It's a beautiful building, such an innovative way to do housing. And as a much younger professional, I would have loved to live downtown Santa
Right?
Barbara on State Street. That would have just been a dream.
Same here. If it was 25 years ago, I would have been all over that type of housing and living situation as a younger professional. It'd be right up my alley. It's up so many people's alley to
Absolutely.
do that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And those of us that don't want to see our children moving out of the area because they can't afford to live, right?
Yes, yeah.
What sort of rents are being charged on those properties?
We have 3 of the 14 that are deed restricted. That we have 2 at low income. That this will amaze you. A studio rental there is $900
Oh, wow.
a month, where a brand new studio on the open market, if you went to one of these Class A apartments right off State Street, a studio would cost you nearly $3,000 to rent now. But we have those at around 900, and then the rest are even though they're not deed restricted, we're the housing authority. So even though they're technically market rate, we're going to be under market, and our rental prices for those studios are at $1,700 a month.
That's amazing.
And that's below the HUD published fair market rent level for a studio, which you can get now about it's about $2,200 a month for a studio rental. And that's at the 40th percentile of rents for studios in Santa Barbara County.
That's great. And what about with the teachers' housing? What are you thinking as far as rents there?
So those rents will all be, those apartments at the Parma School will all be, it'll be a low-income housing tax credit development. And the reason why we're comfortable doing it as 100% affordable is we've done a survey, and there's plenty of households working for the school district that would have an interest in living there that are low income. So we can bring in the funding source to make it happen through like the low income housing tax credit program and other funding sources to build the development out. But the rents will be very low. We'll project base it with Section 8. So we'll be able to go with the fair market rents, the payment standards that we use for, if it's a studio, it would be about $2,200. If it's a 1-bedroom, it'd be more like $2,500 to $2,600. If it's a 2-bedroom, it'll probably be like close to $3,000. But again, that's using the voucher program, and the teachers only pay 30 that would live there, or the whether you're, you could be anybody, an administrative assistant at the school district. You only have to pay 30% of your income for your portion of the rent there, which makes it truly affordable.
That's great. Any other ideas on what might help spur more adaptive reuse of some of these commercial properties in town?
I think there's one item that's going back to City Council soon, which is their adaptive reuse zoning, which hopefully will also provide property owners with incentives rather than just saying, you can do this. One thing to make it even more tantalizing, for lack of a better word, for property owners to do adaptive reuse is to reduce the cost to convert. And that would be through fee reductions and priority processing of the plans to do that work and get it approved through community development at the city. So that helps. And being able to take the shell of a building without having restrictions by the city to say, you can only do 14 per our existing zoning in this building. Well, what if there's space to do more than what the current code says? If I could get 20 units there that are still livable, and I'm staying within that shell of the building that exists, that should be allowed. And that is what the city is considering with their adaptive reuse zoning changes, which will be really super helpful. If you can get more units, that helps offset the costs when you can have that revenue coming in from the rentals. And bottom line is, you're going to have more rentals to help more community members stay in this community.
And, to make those properties more financially viable, when you can rent out the top floor and have the bottom floor be still available for
Yes.
commercial.
Yep.
Growing up in the town of Solvang, that's a lot of what they have downtown in Solvang is the apartments up top, and
Exactly.
family members lived up there.
For a while,
Yeah.
before I came to work for the housing authority, I lived in Solvang
Yeah.
in one of those apartments above the shops,
Yeah.
and I'd come out of the apartment. People say, "What do you?" I said, "I live here." And I said, "People actually live in Solvang?" Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love this concept of employer-sponsored housing, where employers are looking for solutions to these problems. I know that the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce is doing a whole lot
Yes.
around employer-sponsored housing, and it's great that you're working with the district on this solution for their employees.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the chamber has a great concept for the employer-sponsored housing. If they can work with developers like the Taylors on La Cumbre Plaza or Paseo Nuevo, that's going to be another big development that could put a lot of housing right downtown. If a number of those units could be master leased by a consortium of employers, and they can keep those units affordable for their employees, wouldn't that be great?
That'd be fantastic.
That those employees have some stability in their housing costs, and the employers also have the stability of their employees, and adding to, I don't know, the employees' happiness for being able to live in the community where they work. So many people commute daily in and out of this community if they decide to stay working here, and that's a hard lifestyle. Spending an hour on the road each way to come into work, that takes away a lot of family time and a lot of community time. So if you can marry the two and have people live where they work, that's
Absolutely.
the best of both worlds.
And also to take the pressure off of our roads and the commute and
Yeah,
all of the traffic that
environmentally,
we
it's so
see.
much better,
Absolutely.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So speaking of local employers, we know that they're definitely in favor of more housing. Many are struggling to find qualified employees that are already here, and the relocation costs can be insane. What's been your perception of the response to some of these projects from the local community?
Well, what the local community, at least the people I hang out with, have the same concerns I do, and that is, we need more housing. Yes, we need to really tackle the supply problem, and that's why we're in a national housing crisis across the nation, because we have underbuilt for the demand, the need. And the same is here in Santa Barbara. We definitely need more supply, but who do we supply that housing to is really an important question. I think we need to have preferences for this housing that will be built for local people who live here or work here, rather than
Enticing
creating
more.
the building, right, rather than creating the units and having it go to as a secondary a home for people to come up here on the weekend out of LA or something. We've seen a lot of that. Or, using them as short-term rentals, which the city's cracked down on. They've done a great job of that. But so the one thing that's really important is to make sure it goes to locals here first, and people who work here or will be working here, and making sure it's affordable as well. Like I said at the beginning of our chat here today, the people who need housing the most are those who are most rent burdened, and those are your moderate income households and below. And that's where, a lot of people, when they see these new buildings being proposed, these new developments, they just want to be assured there's going to be an appropriate level of affordable units included in that development, so that it's inclusive. We have an inclusionary policy in the city for any development that 10%, at least 10% of the development needs to be set aside for moderate income households. That's good, but I think we need more than that. I think we need to also target for low income. I don't like the idea of just approving these developments and having it just be market rate or even the minimum, saying, okay, do the minimum 10%. When we have such a huge need, if you're going to have a vital, vibrant community, that means you have a mix of income, household incomes in a development. And you want it mixed throughout the development. You know, some developments back east and whatnot, they used to have like, okay, we'll do some affordable, but they'll be over on this side of the building. Like, you poor people, you have to go through the poor door over there. I don't like that. I like it all mixed in. To have your low income households, they're just low income because they're not paid as much as the people who aren't low income. They're good workers or everything else. They need to have an affordable home too.
Well, and like you shared with us earlier, when you say low and moderate income, you've kind of given the examples of it's not what you think. It's the people that are already here in our community that are trying to stay here to help employ our businesses and to make things possible. When you say moderate income, I think what's interesting is moderate is even higher than you might think. So you're talking about people maybe making six figures that are still challenged trying to find housing here locally. I think the one area that we always struggle with is the missing middle, the middle income families. We just ran a program with the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco where they were putting up $50,000 on a match program for people that were looking to buy homes. And a family of two could make up to $140,000 a year and be able to qualify for this program. And sometimes $50,000 is not enough to even make it worthwhile. But I think we had 6 or so applicants going through the program. I know 3 that actually have closed. Unfortunately, the funding dried up really quickly, but programs like that are fantastic to try and address all areas.
Absolutely. There's such a huge need for programs like that as well. And that's one area that I'm excited to, recently on both sides of the aisle with the election season, I'm hearing a lot more about affordable housing, home ownership, affordable housing.
Yes.
In addition to rental housing. And there are some programs being proposed and being talked about that haven't been talked about for quite a few decades during election season. If we can get traction on that, we can get some real programs put in place. We can get some of those programs that your bank has done good work with refunded and have resources put in to being able to help even more homeowners buy their first home and whatnot. That's
absolutely
wonderful.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you to our listeners for joining us. To learn more about the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara or how to get involved with them, visit their website at hacsb.org. We'll also be publishing a blog post when we release this podcast, which will provide links to learn more about housing needs in our communities, along with links to some of the resources that Rob has referenced for us today. For this, or to learn more about American Riviera Bank, visit us at americanriviera.bank. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to continuing the conversation about innovations in housing on the Central Coast in our future episodes.